Hi, I'm Brian Wager, SELPA Program Specialist. In hopes of providing support with the changes that we are implementing regarding multi-part IEPs, we've created this brief video to describe some of the changes outlined in the memo that was released. We hope that this is helpful. Being asked to implement procedural changes during normal times can be challenging enough, but doing so at a time where so many of us can feel disconnected from one another can be even more difficult. If you have questions or concerns or need clarification on the procedures outlined here or in the memo, please don't hesitate to contact your program specialist for support. When we say multi-part IEPs, we're referring to those IEPs that cannot be completed in one meeting and the team has to reconvene for multiple parts. Sometimes you get through everything but the offer of FAPE in part 1 and have to reconvene to complete it, and sometimes you might only get through demographics. When holding multi-part meetings for an initial, like if the initial IEP for a student who is not yet receiving services is not complete and the meeting ends, use the IEP notes page to explicitly state which IEP forms have been discussed and considered and which forms have not yet been discussed, and state that the IEP will continue and that the team will reconvene at a mutually agreeable time. Indicate that there has not yet been an offer of FAPE made. All team members, including the parent, will sign for participation only. Since this is an initial IEP and we cannot affirm a meeting event until an offer of FAPE is made and the meeting remains open, we can't use SaySign to collect signatures. Participation signatures for an incomplete initial will have to be collected using an informed K-12 form or on the physical parent consent form if you're meeting in person. On the subsequent continuations of that initial IEP, you'll create a new notes page with a current date and indicate clearly that this is a continuation meeting and what part you're holding. When the initial IEP is complete, affirm all forms of the IEP together, including the notes page from each part. All team members will sign in participation on the parent consent form, and the parent will or will not provide consent on that consent form. Remember to include all notes pages and consent pages from each part clearly labeled with the date and the meeting part in the file as an attachment to the IEP in SACE. When a multi-part IEP needs to be held, like if the annual is not finished when the meeting ends, it'll need to be addressed on the notes page. On the IEP notes page, include a list of which forms were discussed and considered, and which forms have not yet been discussed. If one or more services have been discussed, document changes to the offer of FAPE on the services page, and any areas to which the parent has provided consent in order to begin implementation. For example, if the IEP team reviewed an SLP assessment and increased speech services from the previous IEP, this may have taken the entire IEP meeting and nothing else was addressed before the team has to adjourn. From a comp ed standpoint, anytime after the date of the IEP, if we do not increase services to the level we know the student needs as a result of that assessment, we would be responsible to provide comp ed for that time. A parent could provide consent in order to implement that service before the team reconvenes to go through the rest of the services and complete the IEP. Document specifically what changes the parent is consenting to on the notes page. Now, procedurally speaking, there are several options we could use for a parent to provide consent. The parent could sign after a statement we write in the notes page, obviously a bit of an old school method. The parent could write a letter giving consent, or the parent could sign on the consent page indicating, "I only agree with SLP services." We would not typically do this for an initial IEP. If services have not been discussed, document that a new offer of FAPE has not been presented and that current services have been extended for 1 year minus 1 day on the services page. It's probably the more common situation. On the services page itself, if there are no changes, extend all existing services from the last consented to IEP out 364 days. Don't make any changes to the services or their frequency and duration on the current IEP other than extending the dates, and don't add any new services that you're considering. If there are services that the parent is consenting to, change only those services on the service page. Affirm all forms that are a part of this annual IEP, including the ones that have not yet been discussed. This will help to maintain that electronic story of the IEP process. All IEP team members, including the parent, will sign as participants only on the consent page, unless the parent is consenting to particular changes. Each subsequent continuation meeting should be held as amendments with the meeting purpose indicated as continuation, either of the annual review, triennial review, or both. Don't document changes to the IEP in the Changes to IEP section on the amendment page. Changes are documented on the IEP notes page. On the notes page, indicate which part of the IEP is being held, list which forms were being discussed and considered, and if the meeting is incomplete, which forms have not yet been discussed. If the IEP remains incomplete, indicate that the team will reconvene to complete the IEP. Again, affirm all forms that are part of that annual IEP in order to maintain and tell the electronic story. And if the IEP is incomplete, all team members, yes, the parent too, will sign for participation on the amendment page. If the IEP is complete, all team members will sign for participation and the parent will be asked to sign for consent on the amendment page. A new consent page is not necessary. Parent consent to the amendment will meet the requirement for consent to the IEP. Once the parent does consent, make sure to indicate in the Say Student record that the parent has signed the IEP. Remember to provide the parent a complete copy of the IEP. Good thing you just affirmed all the related pages and don't have to go around scrambling for amendment pages, right? Thanks so much for watching. You can access the memo in a link here in the description. Please give it a read. Hopefully this video was helpful, and again, contact your friendly neighborhood program specialist if there's anything that we can help out with.